The Nioh 2 alpha released this week to a random group of people, and I was lucky enough to be one of those chosen to try it out. I'll start off by saying that while I was very excited to play the original Nioh's retail release, it gradually became an unenjoyable experience for me. I have tried to return to the original game several times since its release, but that usually ends after about 15 minutes when old frustrations return. I don't want to make this a review of Nioh 1, but I do feel that it's important that I quickly state what frustrated me about the first game, as it does impact my opinion of the second. I want to preface these frustrations by saying that it's painfully obvious how much Team Ninja cares about this franchise. I was invited to play both the alpha and the beta of the first Nioh, and Team Ninja took a lot of the feedback from those tests and actually implemented it. If you're wondering how different things were between the alpha and the retail release, here are a few examples. First, if your key meter depleted for any reason, you got stuck in place for a couple seconds even while running. You had to stop running just before your key ran out in order to prevent it from happening. Attacking with no key also resulted in the same thing, leaving you extremely vulnerable to enemy attacks. Second, elixirs were counted towards your overall item inventory. If you reached 200 items but had no elixirs, then you wouldn't receive any while resting at the shrine. Third, weapons and armor degraded at an extremely aggressive rate. Fourth, camera tracking really wasn't that great. Some of these mechanics were rebalanced, while some of them were removed completely. With that said, there are a few things that made me fall out of love with the game and ultimately stop playing. One of the major causes of this for me was the stance system and how it works in relation to the dodge mechanic. Depending on the stance you're in, you'll either perform a dash or you'll perform a roll. The roll has a lot more invincibility frames, allowing you to dodge a lot more attacks from enemies. Overall, I'm fine with this. My issue is that if your weapon is sheathed, you always dodge instead of roll, regardless of the stance you've selected. Add to this that whenever you use an elixir to heal, you automatically sheath your weapon. Imagine you're in a boss fight and you take a ton of damage and need to heal. So you press up on the D-pad to drink your elixir, but then you need to quickly dodge an incoming attack. Pressing X at this point causes you to dash instead of roll, likely resulting in you taking another huge chunk of damage, or worse, dying. I had hoped that the developer would change this for the final release of the game, but they never did. So now comes Nioh 2. First announced at E3 2018 with a cinematic teaser that alluded to the player character having the ability to transform into a demon, Nioh 2 has the opportunity to improve on the original while at the same time creating a new experience. This game's alpha demo starts off a bit different from the original. We now have the ability to create the player character. While a lot of the customization options are disabled for the demo, we at least have the choice between making a male or female character with a few different style choices available. After creating our character, we're brought into a dojo to learn some of Nioh's basic combat mechanics. While combat is largely the same, for better or worse, a new mechanic is introduced. Just as it was alluded to in the reveal trailer, we are now able to transform into a demon. Like in the first game, we're able to select a guardian spirit to enhance our combat abilities. However, instead of granting us the living weapon ability, we now transform into some kind of demon depending on our guardian spirit selection. Makami the Wolf turns us into a club-wielding brute, Ame no Motori the Hawk turns us into a dual dagger-wielding fighter, and Kagewani the Shark turns us into a glaive-throwing wraith. While there is a transformation that takes place, the Yokai form feels like it performs the exact same function as a living weapon. Activating the Yokai shift is even performed using the same button combination Living Weapon was. While there is more to Guardian Spirits in Nioh 2 than in the original game, Yokai shift seems to be a key ability that just falls a bit flat for me. After getting familiar with the combat, you'll get into the demo's first mission. If you played the first game, you'll quickly come to realize that almost every single enemy in this mission was in the first game. I'm not sure if they're using the exact same models, but I was nevertheless disappointed to see them again after 2.5 years. Even the Yokai enemies are basically the same. They look a little bit different, but have identical movesets to the first game. This isn't to say that there aren't new enemies. There certainly are, but they all seem to be relegated to the Yokai. Your first encounter with a new Yokai comes in the form of Ippon Datara, a one-eyed, one-legged demonic blacksmith. After dispatching this Yokai, you'll receive a Soul Core. Soul Cores can be attuned to your guardian spirit, granting your character with an ability belonging to the Yokai you receive the core from. The Ippon Datara Soul Core grants the Yokai skill One-Legged Fury. Every Yokai I encountered has had a chance of dropping a core. This includes lesser Yokai you wouldn't think are much of a threat, all the way up to bosses. You can attune up to 2 Soul Cores to a Guardian Spirit, but each core has a certain attunement cost to coincide with a Guardian Spirit's attunement limit. It's unclear if you'll be able to increase the attunement limits, but for now, each Guardian Spirit's limit is locked. I think this is one of the most exciting new features of Nioh 2. As you progress through the demo, you'll come across a number of different Yokai enemies and their cores, allowing you to weave Yokai skills into your traditional weapon combos. I think this is a good time as any to quickly discuss the much improved Talon tree system. As a huge fan of Final Fantasy X, I'm always excited to see a developer try their hand at a sphere grid style Talon system. Nioh 2 does this pretty well. While the Talon offerings are very similar to Nioh 1, it's nice to see them arranged with a bit more creativity than in the original game. Defeating Ippon Datara opens the back half of the stage where we get introduced to two more new yokai enemies. One is Gaki, and the other is Waira. Gaki are interesting little creatures that remind me of the one-eyed imps from the first game. Instead of transforming into one-eyed Oni, however, they have the ability to eat other Gaki that have had their ki meter drained. The lore entry for these enemies says that they mistake their stationary kin for a human corpse. If you don't kill one quick enough, it will be eaten by another Gaki, and you'll now be faced with a really large enemy with a more erratic and deadly moveset. Waira are slug-like demons that can roll around and cause massive damage if you're not careful. Their pincer hands are also quite deadly. Dealing with them is relatively easy, but man are they hideous. Once you rummage around the forge and put out some of the fires with big water buckets, it's time to proceed to the demo's first boss, Enenra. Enenra is surprisingly fast for a big boss, but that's mainly because it's smoke covered in rocks. Dealing damage to the boss causes the rocks to give way and for its smoke form to be revealed. In this form, the boss can instantly turn into a tornado and chase after you very quickly. The boss also moves a bit faster in this form, so it's time to bring out our yokai skills and yokai shift to help us. Baiting the boss into breaking the pillars around the room causes water buckets to drop on the boss, cooling him down and dealing massive ki damage. After a while, the boss falls and it's time to move on to the next stage, the Vipers Sanctum. This stage is notably shorter than the first, but introduces a few new enemies. The first of which you'll encounter is Nure Ona, which translates literally to wet woman. This wet woman looks and acts like Medusa, slithering around and attempting to turn you to stone with its deadly gaze. You'll sometimes find these creatures hanging from the ceiling attempting to ambush you. Also in this stage, we'll find serpent statues. Breaking these statues causes sections of the poisonous lake to drain, making the stage easier to traverse. Breaking these statues will also cause the poison puddles in the boss room to drain, so it's in your best interest to get them out of the way before heading into the boss room. The boss of the stage is Yatsu no Kami, a serpent god with a horn made of countless blades protruding from its forehead. I've lifted that description straight from the Yokai Illustrations menu, which I'll cover in a bit. This boss is very frustrating and was the only major brick wall I hit in this demo. I spent more time trying to defeat this boss than I did getting through the Twilight version of the first level. The boss has the ability to slide around the room and hit you with its horn. While this seems easy enough to avoid, it's extremely frustrating that the horn has a wider hitbox than the animation shows. I can't tell you how many times it got clipped by the conal animation and got chunked or even died. I may not be the best Nioh player out there, but I think this boss's hitboxes need some work. The major objective of this boss fight is to kill the snake arms as quickly as possible. The boss is able to shift into the yokai realm, causing the snake arms to become independent snakes that can deal damage. Managing these snakes while the boss continues its onslaught of abilities is very challenging, bordering on unfair if you don't have the DPS to dispatch them quickly. Killing the snakes in the yokai realm causes the boss to shift back to its original phase, and eventually it will spawn new snake arms and the process repeats. I found that by standing at a medium to far distance caused the boss to burrow its snake arms into the ground, allowing me to run past the heads as they popped out of the ground and then dealing damage to the burrowed snake arms. I'd then kill one of the snake arms, making it so I only had to deal with one snake in the yokai realm. While this is a slow and steady strategy, it allowed me to avoid the boss whenever it slithered around on the ground. At this point, all that remains is the Twilight mission. I won't go into too much detail, but if you played Nioh 1, then you know what to expect. Most regular enemies are removed and replaced with yokai of all sorts, giving the stage a great challenge. Nioh 2 also features a Yokai Illustrations menu, which acts as a bestiary for the game. Defeating multiples of the same enemy unlocks additional lore entries for said enemy, and the same goes for bosses. Also available are Guardian Spirit illustrations, which provide lore for the Guardian Spirits. A character directory and something called the Tale of Nioh are also present in the hut menu from the starting point of the map, but they're locked for now. Just like the first game, a blacksmith is available to forge weapons and armor. I noticed that enemies in the Twilight mission drop blacksmithing texts more often than in the regular missions, so it might be a good idea to play through it a few times to get more recipes. The starting point is also where you'll find the Torii Gate, providing the game's online features. Expeditions allow you to join a random player or a friend from the very outset of a mission. You can even suggest which mission to go on with the player. You can also interact with their world by opening chests and looting corpses. Random encounters, on the other hand, begin when a player summons you from a shrine in the level, and you cannot interact with their world. You can still pick up loot from enemies, but you cannot open chests, doors, or pick up treasure from corpses. A battle option is also shown in the menu, but it is not available in the demo. Overall, I think Nioh 2 will be a great addition to the franchise. I would have liked to have seen more enemy variety and even some graphical improvements, but this is still just a demo. HDR is now available, which is always great to see. Nioh 2 is similar to the first game in that you can choose to prioritize frame rate or resolution. There are things that I was hoping to see change from the first game that haven't been, but I honestly had more fun playing this demo than I did Nioh 1's retail release. I feel that this review may have come across as overly critical, so I think it's important that I explicitly say that I think Nioh 2 does a lot of things right and that I had a great time with it. I just hope to see more changes from the original, given it came out almost 3 years ago. Nioh 2 feels like more of the same, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. They didn't have to reinvent the wheel, but I'm hopeful that they change some more things before the game comes out. And that about does it for my review of the Nioh 2 Alpha. I'm hopeful that we'll get a Nioh 2 Beta similar to how the first game worked with its demos, but nothing has really been said. E3 is a few weeks away, so maybe we'll hear more then. If you like this content and you want to see more like it, please subscribe to the channel so you get alerted when new videos go live. If you really like this content, please consider becoming a channel member by clicking the blue join button below this video. With all that said, I'm SweetJohnnyCage, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.